could bring some other members of your team forward to talk about policy 8.01, student progression plans. If Diana Fetterman and Lisa Carmona could come and join Dr. Sheffield. This will be our final presentation for the day, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, good afternoon again. Today's workshop, our second workshop for today, is just to provide an overview of the district's pupil progression plan, per Florida Statute 8.01. It is a plan that we must bring forth to the board each year. A major update for this year's plan is the addition of distance learning being a part of our instructional method of educating our students. And again, as we continue to navigate in our current space of providing instruction in both brick and mortar and distance learning, our goal for right now is to minimize changes at this time. So at this time, I'm allow Diana Fetterman, our Assistant Superintendent for Teaching and Learning, to provide us with an overview and some of the changes, again, in which we will see for this year's plan. Mrs. Fetterman.
Good afternoon. For our first workshop on the policy 8.01, which is this year's pupil progression plan, I'm just going to highlight a few of the changes that we are bringing forward in this year's plan. So as you know, it is the 8.01 pupil progression is a plan that we bring forward every year, and the changes that we make reflect either changes in state statute or reflect changes in district practice. The biggest change, as Dr. Sheffield said, is the inclusion of a definition of distance learning. As we certainly learned last spring, this is something that we did not have in our plan, but is something that we recognize we need to. Moving forward, we plan to include this in our plan, and it also offers the school board and the superintendent the opportunity to move to distance learning in the case of an emergency. Some additional changes that we have noted include K-5 remediation. Most of these changes are changes in language that reflect statutory changes. One of the bigger changes you will note is a change that requires a certification for teachers. This is for our grade 3 teachers that are teaching students that have previously been retained, or any elementary teacher providing intensive support to our students in the area of literacy. They are now required to have, by statute, either a reading endorsement or a reading certification. We have had 3 years of warning from the DOE that this was coming, so we have been working with our teachers to get this additional certification or endorsement to provide them with that. In fact, our district is one of the few districts that we provide this particular training and these workshops free of charge for our teachers. We provide them completely online, so teachers do not have to come in the evenings, where many districts are offering them in the evenings. We provide them completely online for teachers in a self-paced course. We've made some adjustments here, changing some names again, either a name change for an organization, making some additional language changes because of statute. One piece that we did have to verify and place in because of an FAQ sent out by the DOE is that distance learning does not provide the statutory requirement where all of our students for graduation do need to take an online course. The distance learning does not satisfy that requirement, and that is per an FAQ put out by the Florida Department of Education. Additionally, we have some bullet points there about some adjustments to the articulation agreement with Palm Beach State College and Florida Atlantic University. And then finally, we have 2 other pieces here. The first is about our community service requirements. This is actually a piece that is currently in our own board policy. It was just never included within our student progression plan, so we are just including it in student progression, that principals will recognize students that earn either 100, 300 hours, or 500 hours of community service. And the second piece, although students always had a 13th year to finish any assessment requirements that were necessary, we're adding in the opportunity to remediate credit deficiencies. Those are some of the big changes we are proposing in this first workshop.
Dr. Robbins.
Would you please refresh me and tell me who has to take intensive reading?
So in our for our secondary schools, any student that is a level 1 or a level 2 has to be looked at for reading intervention. And that intervention could either be in an intensive reading class, or it can just be reading support by a qualified teacher, which is just extra reading training. In order to determine which one the student gets, you have to look a little bit further. So we have a decision tree, we look a little further. If the student is reading 2 or more years below grade level, then that student needs 2 periods of help, and one of those periods of help must be intensive reading. If the student is not reading 2 or more years below grade level, the student only needs 1 period of help. That 1 period of help can be intensive reading, or it can be a content area teacher, science or social studies, with specialty training, either one.
Follow up, Mr. Barbieri?
Go ahead, Dr.
So
Robbins.
just the converse of that. So would it be appropriate to assume that if you have performed at level 3, 4, or 5 on ELA, that you would not be placed in an intensive reading class?
Students who score level 3, 4, or 5 are not required to take intensive reading.
Okay, so this is why I bring this up. I was recently told that, as I understood it, that there are some schools who are putting students who previously scored level 3, I think it's probably 3, but 3, 4, or 5 in intensive reading to somehow game the system. Don't ask me. I didn't quite follow it. But if you would, please, I guess Dr. Fenoy is not there, Mr. Oswald, if you would ask Mr. Howard to sort the data for you to see if that is or is not true. Thank you.
Thank you.
That it?
That's it.
Any other questions, board members? So, board members, as board chair, I'm kind of given a schedule of trying, where they expect me to try and keep the meetings, and so I don't mean to cut you off. I just try to meet their expectations. So I hope I didn't offend anybody, especially Dr. Robinson. I'm just trying to keep to the expectations that they kind of set for me when we're going to get these done. I'm going to ask the superintendent to look at our schedule of workshops where there's an expectation there's going to be a lot of board discussion. I'm going to see if we cannot put them back to back with other workshops so we can kind of spread that out to give everybody the opportunity to speak as much as they'd like to on the subject. Go ahead, Dr. Robinson.
Mr. Barbieri, I was not offended. I understand what you're trying to do. I just think that there are some things that we really need to dig into more. I hope we have a relatively soon, I guess once that PYG data becomes available, that we had a workshop on the follow-up on choice. But I also want to say, just as a matter of routine, it's not as bad as it used to be, but when we have board workshops, there should be more time allotted for the board to discuss it instead of us just being talked through the PowerPoint the staff gave us.
Sure.
Right. Thank you.
Ms. Brill, did you have your hand up? Nope.
I was debating whether to say this, but I do know that I was surprised when I saw the topics today like this, but I do know that we had to move the strategic plan because we were dealing with the other issues in recent weeks. So that kind of shifted our schedule a little bit. And so I trust that we won't have that problem going forward.
Okay. Mr. Superintendent, do you have anything to add?
Mr. Chairman, I have nothing else to add other than there's some information the team needs to bring back to the board, and we will follow up on that.
All right, thank you. We have a motion to adjourn the workshops. Motion by Mrs. Andrews, second by Ms. Whitfield. Any discussion? All in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Meeting is adjourned. Thank you all.